have been exposed to Greek life. I know folks who have pledged, good friends. I can't say any family members that I know of, no. But, you know, I went to Temple University and definitely saw the Divine Nine represented there, frequented Westchester University often. In fact, I think I did more, I did more social activities at Westchester than I did at Temple. Temple was all about my work and my kids and my school. Westchester was where all my friends were, so I would go out there. So shout out to the Dub CU community and the Rams out there. But this conversation tonight is about the Greek life, and you know, whether it's the pledging process, the reality of hazing, the misconceptions and criticisms. I think that's just a really important conversation, especially from the perspective of a Black community, that we need to have, right? Because at the end of the day, whether you're a member of a Greek organization or not, these are our mothers, our brothers, our sisters, our cousins, the list goes on, right? Essentially just family. And so wanted to make sure that we had this conversation, and part of what sparked the reasoning for this was the recent death of Marlon W. Jackson, who was a 23-year-old student at Delaware State University. He passed away in a fatal car crash last week, and his family has alleged that he fell asleep at the wheel as a result of being hazed while pledging Kappa Alpha Psi. And so today I'm really appreciative of two women, especially during Women's History Month. I'm really appreciative of these two women for coming and you know, joining me in the lounge and just being ready and open to have this conversation. So my guest in studio is Jennifer A. Santiago, Esquire. She is a member of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated and president of the National Pan-Hellenic Council for Southeastern Pennsylvania. And then joining me via phone is Evelyn Sample Oates. She is a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. She is also the executive director at the School District of Philadelphia and is the former international board member for AKAs. So welcome both of you ladies. How are you?
I'm doing well, doing well.
Yes. Evelyn, are you there via phone?
I am here, Sarita. Thank you so much for having me on tonight.
Yeah, no. Thank you both for making time and space for this conversation to happen, and your willingness to, you know, just to let's talk, right? And so let's start here. I want each of you kind of just let folks know a little bit about who you are, what you do, and that can be, you know, whether it's within the Greek life or not, you know, just the work that you do in your day-to-day life.
I'll let Evelyn go first because she has more time in Greek life.
Evelyn, you can go ahead and lead. Oh, did we just lose her? Okay, bringing her back in.
I'm here.
Yeah. There we go. Okay. Yeah, you can go ahead and kick it off.
Oh, great. I'm sorry, I missed. Did you open it up with a question?
Yeah, it was just who you are, what you do, just getting folks acquainted with you.
Great. So, again, Sarita, I want to thank you for having me on. I am a member, 35-year member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. I'm a lifetime member, and I have been serving. I was initiated. I pledged my freshman year at American University, and second semester freshman year, and I've been a member. And I come from a family of Greek members. My mother's a Delta. My father was a Kappa. My brother was a Kappa. So I come from a family of the Divine Nine. My husband is an Alpha. So I have certainly a love and appreciation and a lifetime commitment to my organization. And I work with young people now. I work for the School District of Philadelphia. I do government relations and external affairs. And, you know, I encourage some of the seniors that I meet in my travels that when they go to college to look for the Divine Nine. Of course, I always push the women towards Alpha Kappa Alpha. Sorry about that. But it is, I tell people it is one of the best decisions that I've ever made. And it has been nothing but help to me in my life. And I think those organizations are great when treated properly, when involved properly, when you have the right intentions. I think that they could do a world of good.
Got you. Okay. And then I'll toss it over to you, Jennifer.
So, as you indicated, I am a proud member of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated, Beta Delta Zeta chapter here in Philadelphia. And because I said that Evelyn had more time, and it's because I am 2 years old. I came in through graduate chapter.
Okay.
So I have a very different perspective, a very new perspective. And fortunately, I guess my work speaks for itself because I am the newly installed president of the National Panhellenic Council for Southeastern Pennsylvania. We have currently 23 financial chapters in our council. And of course, our council is comprised of the entire D9. So we have multiple AKA chapters, Delta chapters, Zeta chapters. We do have one Iota chapter, multiple Alpha chapters, Kappa chapters, 2 Omega chapters, and 2 Sigma chapters as well. So everybody is there. We do have the one Philadelphia chapter of SG Row also present in the council. So I have a very unique perspective because, of course, I have a younger perspective in terms of Greek life, but then I also sit at the helm and figuring out what the problems are that face all 9 organizations. In my professional life, I am an attorney here in Philadelphia, practicing criminal defense, personal injury, and family law.
Okay. All right. So I feel like between the two of you, we definitely have some really interesting and strong perspectives that we can bring to this conversation. So I'm really excited to kind of dive in. So I kind of spoke earlier on there about my personal decision in trying to navigate whether or not I would pledge, which, you know, just in full transparency, if I did, I was leaning towards the Deltas. That's not shade towards anybody, y'all. All right. I want to make sure I'm being honest. But I was trying to figure out if that was going to be for me. And so I'm interested in learning. And Evelyn, I know you spoke a little bit more to like kind of the family lineage, right? Like the Divine Nine is represented in your family. But on a more personal level, why did you decide to pledge, right? And then eventually both of you in your own rights step into kind of a next level of leadership. Evelyn, with you going to an international level, and then Jennifer with your recent appointment. Like, what kind of influenced those things? And you can kind of jump in.
Yeah, well, so I learned, I decided at a young age, like I said, I was 18 years old when I was initiated. I went to a majority school. So when I went away to college, first time really ever away from home, I mean, it wasn't that far, it was D.C., but it was still away from home. And not only was I homesick, but I just I gravitated towards people that looked like me, and there weren't that many of them at American University. So I gravitated towards those women who were in both Delta and AKA, because both of those organizations were very active on our campus at the time. My mother was a Delta, but growing up, she raised my brother and I. You know, my father was a professional football player, so he, you know, when he retired, he was off promoting a book. So my mother was home with us, so she wasn't active. So I didn't really see her involvement with the sorority. I didn't even really know she was a Delta until much later, because she didn't have the time to be active. And all the girls in my neighborhood, all of my neighbors and everybody were all AKAs. So when I saw them come home from college and they had this pink and green and they talked about the sorority, I was like, you know what, I'm going to do that when I go away to school. So when I went to American, you know, I met the AKAs right away. I sought them out on campus, met them. They were wonderful women, and I jumped in right away. And it helped me. It helped me in college because, again, I needed to be with people that looked like me, you know, people that shared the same culture, and that helped me get through college at a majority school.
Yeah.
And it just, you know, I quickly went in. I became the president of the chapter. So the things that we did, the service and the things that we gave back, the people that we helped, the kind of impact we had on that campus and in that D.C. community was wonderful. I mean, it was what this was all about. We were helping people, and, you know, not hurting people, but we were helping. And we may have done some, you know, some things when we were coming through the process, some silly things, but a lot of things that we did was about discipline, and it was about coming together as one and bonding with your line sisters and the other people in the chapter. So that's why I tell people, you know, and I'm very active. You know, I have never been inactive. in 35 years, and I show my daughter, and you know, and it's not just, you know, we're all in it. We wear different colors, different letters, but we all serve and we help mankind. Fraternities and sororities, that's what we do, and that's what we're supposed to do. So as long as you're doing the right things and your intentions are right, then it's a great thing. So that's really my story, my love for it. I mean, my mother is my best friend in the whole world, probably the closest person in the world to me next to my husband, and she's in another sorority. But so it's all good.
Gotcha. Okay, and then Jennifer, why don't you go ahead and jump in? So
I actually, when I went away to undergrad, and I can't really say away because I went to the University of Pennsylvania, I actually went to campus and I said, I'm not going to be Greek. I said, I'm not going to pay for sisters, and I'm not going to deal with all that because I grew up with sisters. When I got to campus, and Penn is not very diverse to be in the city of Philadelphia, I met with the Zetas. The AKAs were on campus. The Deltas were reactivating. We did not have any SG Rows on campus. But I met with the Zetas, and there was just something very genuine, something loving. Like, it felt like a family. And so I fell in love immediately. However, it was not my path to join immediately. Family, finances, a whole bunch of different issues came up, and so I could not join. And so it took me 15 years to get into Zeta Land from undergrad. And I fell in love with the work they did. I fell in love with the service, the bond, just the amazing respect that they had for one another, and just the respect and pride that they had in themselves. And so when it came time to finally say, hey, I really want to do this, the women that I met on Penn's campus were actually still the women who were there to open their arms when I entered into Zeta Land. And so for the past 2 years, I've, been working with our organization, doing various community service projects. I'm actually we call it the Z-Hope. That is our community service chair. I, help facilitate all of our community service projects throughout the city. And it's just such a fulfilling role to be able to give back to the community that means so much to me. This is home. And so when we're out there, cleaning up the streets, serving the homeless, going to the hospitals, to the NICU, and things like that, and seeing the look on these people's faces when they're like, you don't even know me from Joe Schmo, but you're here loving on me, it's amazing. It
Gotcha.
Really is.
Gotcha. Well, I'll tell you what, like you both know that we invited people to kind of join this conversation, and we have a caller who's on the line. Let's go to line 1 with Denise Clay. Hey, Denise.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing great. Welcome to the lounge. How you doing?
Not bad, not bad. I'm probably going to anger a whole lot of people with what I say next, and I will say this in the interest of full disclosure. My mom was an AKA, so she was one of Evelyn's sorors, and I'm engaged to marry an alpha.
Congratulations.
That said, if you got rid of the Panalytic system right now, I would not be at all upset, because, quite frankly, it's kind of antiquated. It's a system that we as a community can't afford to continue to support.
And why do you believe
Why do you
that?
say that? Yeah.
Because, quite frankly, there's a certain amount of elitism to it. Not everybody can join because it's expensive. And not everybody is, like I said, not everybody can join because it's expensive. A lot of the rituals that are practiced to get in are borderline illegal. And there's things that we can't afford this anymore. Even W.E.B. Du Bois disavowed the whole concept of the talented 10th before his death. So why are we still keeping it up with this?
Well, Denise, if I could say, so I do agree about the expense part of it. I do agree with that. And my sorority sisters know that I advocate and I speak up, because I think it can be expensive, especially for younger undergraduate members who are trying to come in, and it's just too expensive when they're fighting to keep, parents are fighting to keep their kids in school, and surely they don't have the kind of money some of them may not have the kind of money we're asking for them to join. So I do agree with the expense part. The illegal part, I have to just take issue with, because none of the rituals, none of the practices, none of the activities that we mandate, Alpha Kappa Alpha mandates that you have to do in order to come into the organization are illegal. There's some people who take it into their own hands and do some things, but what we mandate as an organization, there's nothing illegal about it. It's focused around sisterhood, service, and scholarship. And I think it's unfortunate that some people will do certain things that aren't mandated and then cross that line, and then it hurts the organization.
I would actually go to a step further. In 1990, that is actually when the NPHC came out with the definition of hazing.
For those who don't know.
The National Pan-Hellenic Council.
Gotcha.
And so, as you indicated, I am actually the president for the Southeastern Pennsylvania region, but we have completely throughout the whole country, there is the higher up, and I'm just one of. Okay? In 1990, the definition of hazing was put forth, and that is how all of the organizations had begun to change over their practices. All of our organizations have counsel, either in-house or, they actually go ahead and go with outside counsel. All of us do risk assessment trainings on a regular basis, and everybody has looked into what those practices are. So we actually, and it's something you kept mentioning, you continue to say, pledging. We do not use the word pledging, okay? It is an intake process. Okay. And there is nothing illegal by the intake process if it is completed as it is prescribed from each organization's national headquarters, or I should say international headquarters, as most of us are international. As Evelyn indicated, unfortunately, there will be that one person who takes it upon themselves to do something that is outside the box. It is not sanctioned by any of our international presidents. It is not something that any of us take lightly. And so I never want anyone to think that any of us are going through any kind of an illegal process. None of our processes require physical abuse, mental abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, because I know that that's also been out there. And this is actually a conversation that I've actually had with younger people, including people in my own family. The best example I give everybody is my 13-year-old nephew. When he found out I became a member of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated, his exact words were, and we're Puerto Rican, so, Titi, you let somebody beat you? Titi means auntie, for those who don't know. And I looked at him and I said, what are you talking about? And he said, I saw burning sands. And I said, no, sweetheart. None of us, and I stand firm when I say none of us, from Alpha through Iota, so our first through the number 1 through the 9th, condone any of those actions at all.
Gotcha. Well, I'll tell you what, let's take a break here. When we come back on the other side, we're going to pick up this conversation with both of my guests who appreciate you both for coming on. Jennifer A. Santiago, Esquire, who is a member of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated and also the president of the National Pan-Hellenic Council for Southeastern Pennsylvania, and Evelyn Sample Oates. She is a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. She's also the executive director at the School District of Philadelphia and a former international board member for the AKAs. When we do come back, I want to touch on that concept of discipline, right? Because I think somewhere in what Denise was saying, and Denise, thank you for calling in and giving your thoughts. I think there's a question in there about that, but then also getting into the risk assessment training, the risk assessment that is carried out, and like what exactly does that process look like? Is that members from the national organizations coming down and going into each chapter and kind of diving into the weeds of that, and then also intake process versus pledging? That shift in is it just a shift in terminology, or are those actually two separate things? I think some folks will have some questions about that. And then I'm also interested to get you all's thoughts on whether you feel that there is a difference in the treatment or perspective of the Divine Nine versus majority white Greek organizations. I think that's definitely a conversation worth, or at least, just a kind of sidestep, worth diving a little deep into. So listen, thank you all for tuning in, and don't go anywhere. You are in the lounge on WURD Radio 96.1 FM, 900 AM. We're going to take a break. We'll be back on the other side.
Listen to Word Radio on the go with the Word Radio app. Search for WURD in your favorite app store today and take us with you wherever you go. Stay connected to Word Radio, independent Black media.
The Kimmel Center offers free arts education programs to schools across the region. Teaching artists visit classrooms to educate, engage, and inspire the next generation using creative learning experiences, and schools take trips to the Kimmel Center for live performances. The Kimmel Center is committed to educating Philadelphia's youth by providing access to quality arts. For more information, visit kimmelcenter.org.
WordRadio.com.
Hey, this is Dr. Aaron Smith, morning show host of Waking Up with Word Child, and I'm inviting you, WURD audience, to the 40th annual George Washington Carver Science Fair live broadcast on Temple University's campus in Temple U's Our Mark Star Complex at 15th and Montgomery, March 5th, from noon until 2 p.m. During the live broadcast, we will be talking with students, alumni, and key figures that made the successful science fair one of the biggest in the city for over 40 years. Catch me, the rapping professor, WURD and Temple University's own When Worlds Collide, the best of both worlds, y'all, at the 40th annual George Washington Carver Science Fair, Tuesday, March 5th from noon to 2 p.m. One more again at the R. Mark Star Complex at 15th and Montgomery. I'll see y'all there, waking up and staying up with Word, y'all.
Hey now, this is Dr. Guthrie Ramsey of Musicology, and you're listening to The Lounge on Word Radio.
You're in the lounge on WURD Radio, 96.1 FM, 900 AM. I'm your host, Sincerely Sarita. I'm joined in studio with my guest. Well, I have two guests, but in studio, I have Jennifer A. Santiago, Esquire. She's a member of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority, Inc., and also the president of the National Pan-Hellenic Council for Southeastern Pennsylvania. And then on the line, I have Miss Evelyn Sample Oates. She is a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated and executive director at the School District of Philadelphia. She's also the former international board member for the AKAs. And so, ladies, again, thank you both for joining us in this conversation about Greek life, kind of weeding through some misconceptions and criticisms of the Divine Nine in particular, but then also shedding some additional light into what it really means to be a member, right, of Greek life, and the pros and cons of it, some of the dangers of it in terms of hazing. This conversation really spurred out of the recent death of Marlon W. Jackson, who was a 23-year-old student at Delaware State University. He passed away last week in a fatal car crash, and his family is asserting that that happened as a result of him falling asleep at the wheel due to him being hazed as he pledged Kappa Alpha Psi. So there's that, and then we also have some other instances out here that have been going on. And so prior to break, I kind of laid out some things I want to jump into. And Evelyn, let's start with the discipline, just more so based off of Denise's feedback, which was one of our callers. Shout out to her for calling in. But you mentioned in terms of the intake process, right? Yes. I'm learning my terms now. I'm learning that discipline is a really big part of it. And Brittany Mingo, she's a college advisor. She's also a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. She wrote in some of her thoughts, and I'm going to read kind of a quote of what she said, and maybe we can kind of dive into how this does apply to discipline. But she, let's see where we want to pick up here. Okay, so she said, though approaches may be different, incoming members of all fraternities and sororities, regardless of the race, religious affiliation, or socioeconomic status, have to enter into some form of a pledging process. However, if we look at the decline in the quality of the members being produced by every organization across the board, and if we are honest, we can admit that the pledging process is ineffective in developing strong leaders and is solely for social status. We risk precious lives in order to prove students are worthy of being a member of an organization. This is perhaps one of the most dangerous misconceptions about pledging, that it is necessary. And so my question is that, when we're talking about discipline or the rituals or the activities, how do you all determine what kind of discipline, quote unquote, what kind of discipline needs to be had and where to draw the line at? Because I think that's where some folks may be getting confused. Like, okay, well, if we're talking about risk assessment, right, which Jennifer, you kind of spoke to, if we're talking about risk assessment as a result of folks trying to enforce discipline because of these rituals or, admittance into the organization and setting a standard, how's that line being drawn, and what really happens? What's the accountability factor that comes into play when it goes too far? Mm-hmm. Is that, well, let me know if I'm making, if I'm making sense of,
No.
Okay.
Yeah. And so first let me say, Sarita, that, my prayers go out to the Jackson family. That was horrific what happened to their son. And certainly, my prayers go out to his family, and I'm so very sorry that happened to him. And when you talk about the process coming into the organization, Alpha Kappa Alpha is 111 years old. So this process has evolved to 111 years old. Certainly, when we started with those 16 women 111 years ago, they didn't do the things that are done now to come into the organization. They started it, and the group after them didn't do the things. So it's evolved over the years. But when I talk about my process, which was called the pledge process, 35 years ago, we were called the Ivy League Pledge Club. Now it is a membership intake process, and we've made that universal across all of the Divine Nine, so we can have some kind of similarity on how our members come in. And it's not about abusing or degrading or hurting. That's not what a brotherhood or a sisterhood is all about. And as we said earlier, it is prescribed with every minute, every step of the process that come into our organization is prescribed in a document to tell you exactly what to do. When I talk about the discipline, I talk about learning the history. I'm talking about learning, some of our traditions, some of the things that make, although we're all very similar in service, but what makes us different than other organizations? I mean, all of us have that in our organization, but that's the discipline I'm talking about. You know, the brand that we all represent, representing that brand. And I think that, again, it has evolved, and sometimes you hear stories about, I mean, I used to hear stories about, my father was a charter member at University of Maryland Eastern Shore, so I used to hear about stories from the things they did. And then I tell stories of some of the things that I did. And then people hear those stories, and then they try and make up their own process or their own things for people to do, and it goes too far. And on the other end, I know that young people who want to come into this organization, they really, really want it. They want to become a member. And sometimes, you know, they'll do anything it takes to get into the organization. But we as members have to stop it and say, you know, it's about your dignity and your pride. And, you know, you always have one big sister, big brother to say, you know, you really don't want to do that. And that's not something you got to think about. But I think that, you know, these organizations have such rich history and have done so much to help mankind, and we can't get away from that. And we've got to stick to that. And yes, there will be some that make poor decisions and do things to harm it. But there's more good than there is harm. And I won't keep going on. I'll let my fellow Greeks speak about it. But go ahead. You can jump in. I know I'm going on and on.
No. I mean, obviously, you have 35 years in. You're passionate. I think we're all passionate about organizations. And more importantly, we're passionate about Greek life in general because it brings so much good to the community. And it brings so much good not just for the work that we do, but for the positive images that we give to the children coming behind us. Most, if not all, of our organizations have youth auxiliaries. Who do you think those young men and women are looking at? You know, when we talk about leadership, when you're looking for brown faces, most brown faces that are in leadership have D9 letters behind them. And so people miss out on certain aspects of Greek life because they see these stories that have come up on TV through the news and understand they're horrific, but they're abnormalities. That's not what happens in most people's intake process. It's not what's happening on a day-to-day. All of our organizations, all of our chapters have new intake classes on a regular basis, fall and spring. And you don't hear all of us having these issues. So when we're talking about discipline, it's not discipline as in, you know, mommy disciplining you. It's disciplining yourself to learn the history, because all of us have rich history, as Evelyn talked about. All of us have rich traditions and just amazing parts that make us uniquely different from the other sorority or the other fraternity. So it's the same way we would say you have to discipline yourself to study in school, not discipline in that negative connotation. And I think people need to understand that. You know, people immediately hear a word, and because they already want to think the worst of us, they think the worst of that word. They find the most negative meaning behind it. But
let me say about the discipline. I mean, I didn't grow up with any sisters. I grew up with 2 older brothers, no sisters. So what I had to learn, part of when I went through my process, was to care about other women, to care about my sister, the one who was in front of me, the one who was behind. There were 9 of us, so there were 8 other young girls I had to think about and care about and make sure they were okay. I was the president of my line, so you know that was something I had to be taught that, because I didn't grow up like that. And I will tell you, to this day, those 8 women are some of my best friends.
Do you think, Evelyn, though, that if you had not pledged, that is a lesson that life would have still found a way to teach you?
I mean, I don't know.
Gotcha.
I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, I asked because, I mean, I think that's, for some people who are trying to consider that or understand it, they're really trying to figure out, like, okay, but again, I think it also goes back to the individual, right?
Absolutely.
And what you need, you determining what you need and how you think the best way for you to fulfill that need or to attain that growth or to reach that next level, what you need. Like, you have to determine that for yourself.
But there is that level, exactly. I mean, like I said, I went into undergrad and I'm like, I have sisters, I don't need this. it still taught me something different. I have two sisters and a brother. Being with my classmates, because we're not supposed to say line because I came in 2 years ago. But for those who need that equivalent, it would have been my line. Being with my classmates, there's 6 of us. Being with those other 5 women taught me a lot about myself that I did not know. And mind you, like I said, this was 2 years ago, so I was 34 years old, a full-fledged attorney, been practicing here and in New York, like, had a lot of life,
right.
a lot of life.
You're grown.
Exactly. grown bills. And there's just something very unique and different about going through this process. It stretches you in a very different and unique way. You learn stuff about yourself that you didn't know. You allow yourself to be vulnerable in a way that you may not have, that you wouldn't necessarily be with your coworker or someone else. And so there is that alone, that going through and learning together. There's nothing that I can make any kind of analogy.
Gotcha. And go ahead, Evelyn.
You said something before the break. You said, what's the difference between the intake and the pledge process? And the difference is we changed the terminology years ago because it became so, such a bad terminology because people were walking around in lines and they weren't speaking and they were all dressed alike and they were, and those things became derogatory and they became bad for the organization. So we changed from a pledgee to the intake process. Both are ways to bring members in. But we were trying to really rebrand what coming into the organization meant. So we wanted to put a more positive spin on it.
Gotcha.
You know what? I can say you can call it whatever you want, but people have to understand that these are people we're bringing in, these are our brothers or our sisters. These are people that we're developing and mentoring. So we shouldn't be hazing. We shouldn't be paddling or hurting them. We shouldn't be making them stay up all night or eat things that they shouldn't be eating. I mean, drink things they shouldn't be drinking. You don't do that to your brother or your sister.
Amen.
So, yeah, it's crazy.
Okay.
And that gives the organization a bad name. And it's not it's just a few. And that's the unfortunate part.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, let's take this break. We got some calls lined up. We got about 3 folks on the line who are definitely interested in joining the conversation, and we want to bring those in on it. And so when we come back on the other side, I'm glad we touched on the intake process versus pledging. I think we can delve a little bit more into the risk assessment, like what that process actually looks like. How do you all go about assessing the risk of whether or not a chapter is in the wrong, potentially, and then also the difference in treatment and perspective of D9 versus majority white organizations. And I'm just out of curiosity, like wondering, were either of you, did you all ever at any point experience an instance during your intake process where you felt like it was a lot, or that a line was crossed? And just hoping some transparency there, or just, whatever insight you can give to that. But let's go to this break. I am joined in studio with Miss Jennifer A. Santiago. She is a lawyer practicing here in Philadelphia and New York. Are used to? I'm like, let me make sure I'm following now. I might have got an update.
I am licensed in New York. I was actually a Bronx ADA up there, but I'm primarily here in Philadelphia, Delaware County, Montgomery County.
Okay. All right, cool. And she is a member of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated. And then Evelyn Sample Oates, she is a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. And so we're going to take this break. You're in the lounge on WURD Radio, 96.1 FM, 900 AM. And when we come back on the other side, we'll get to some calls and then kind of jump back into this conversation. Stay right there. We'll be right back.
EcoWord. Wednesdays on Reality Check with Charles Ellison.
4 p.m. till 7 p.m.
Right here on Word Radio.
And WordRadio.com.
Support independent black media and join the 4Word movement now at 215-425-7875.
Or visit WordRadio.com.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1,
Level up. Hey, ladies.
Ladies, in celebration of Women's History Month, we're proud to announce an exciting contest to recognize young black women leaders between the ages of 18 and 35 in Philly, Chicago, and Los Angeles who are doing great things to empower their communities.
It's called Level Up. Level Up, a celebration of women who got next. Presented by the Independent Black Media Consortium, an exciting new partnership between 3 black-owned radio stations, WURD Radio in Philly, WVON in Chicago, and KJLH in Los Angeles. This is your opportunity to recognize the hard work and dedication of the next generation of black women leaders making a difference in our communities.
Nominees must simply be a young black woman between the ages of 18 and 35 in Philly, Chicago, or LA who is making a difference in her community.
To nominate a woman who's got next, visit WURDradio.com, WVON.com, or KJLHradio.com.
Ladies, it's time to level up. This is Kyle Ingram from Peyote Vision. Shout out to Jay Brown and DJ Ideal Boyfriend, and you are listening to The Lounge on WURD.
You're tuned in to The Lounge on WURD Radio, 96.1 FM, 900 AM. I'm your host, Sincerely Sarita. It's about 8:46 p.m. here in Philly, and we have a full conversation going about Greek life, the ins and outs, the criticisms and misconceptions, hazing, and more. And so I'm joined with two guests, Jennifer A. Santiago, Esquire. She's a member of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated and president of the National Pan-Hellenic Council for Southeastern PA. And then also we have Evelyn Sample Oates, who is a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. She's also the director at the School District of Philadelphia and the former international board member for the AKAs. But we have some callers on the line, so I want to make sure we jump in and engage them. So on line one, we have, and forgive me if I mispronounce it and correct me, is it Araminta?
Yes, Araminta, thank you.
Araminta from West Philly. You're in a lounge. Thank you for joining us.
Sure. And just FYI, Araminta was the birth name of Harriet Tubman.
Huh.
Very nice.
Look at this.
Yeah. Okay.
Women's History Month. Here we go.
She's my adopted grandmother, okay?
Okay, ancestors.
Yes. You know what? I'm sure you're familiar with attorney Michael Cord. He has a program on Word on Sundays called the Radio Courtroom. Mm-hmm. He's also, I guess, a member of a fraternity. Mm-hmm. And he's always asking, why do sororities and fraternities refer to themselves as Greek organizations when the Greeks stole the information and the idea from Africa? And I was wondering if you could address that. His other question is that, and I'm just curious about it too. The other question is, with all the fraternities and sororities and the great work that they do, and the money that they generate, is there ever a possibility that they would join that money and maybe purchase a hotel? Or build a hotel or some type of facility, because when they have their conventions, they're making everyone rich. I'll hang up and listen. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for calling in. So, ladies, you want to address any thoughts?
Well, Hermanta, thank you for that comment. I will say to you, so I love Michael Kord. He is a very good friend. He's a member of Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity. And he's just a good friend of mine. He was a good friend of my dad's.
Amazing attorney, right?
Amazing attorney, right? When we talk about Greek letters, we talk about being Greek. It's not derived from Greek people or from their Greek culture. We use Greek letters to name our organizations, and that's why we refer to ourselves as Greek organizations, because our names are Greek, derived from the Greek alphabet. And when we talk about, I totally agree with you. That is great, and I know our sorority has talked about it for years, that we go into these cities and spend millions and millions of dollars at our conventions, and millions of dollars, and we get very little back. But we add to the tax base of the city, add to their revenue, and certainly people keep their jobs in hospitality, certainly for that week or that we're there. So I agree with you. We need to come together, build our own hotels, build our own halls, so we can give money and keep it back in our community. And I love that, and I totally agree with you.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, when we look at how much money we spend on these conventions, think about it. Come July, Kappa Conclave will be here, and Philadelphia is about to be incredibly rich. But it would be nice for us to be able to give back to our own, and it's not surprising that that's something that Michael Kord pushes, because if you know Michael, you know exactly how invested he is in our communities, and would look to see how we could improve our own communities.
Yeah, and I'm glad she brought that up, because one of my notes in the course of our conversation, I was like, Greek life as an African American, is there ever this point in our intersection where you all kind of say, why are we using Greek anything? When we're black, of a color, whatever it may be. So I'm glad that she did chime in and ask that. Let's go to line 2. Dimitri from Center City. Looks like he wants to comment on the hazing. Dimitri, you there?
Yes. I was never a member of a fraternity, but I had lots of friends who were. And I'm going back to the 60s. My best friend, one of my very best friends, was an Alpha. He became a member of Alpha when he was at what used to be called Drexel Institute of Technology. Now it's Drexel University. And I had a number of friends. But what I found was that there was a lot of, how can I put it, there was a movement back then between people who joined fraternities and then some brothers who called themselves independent. And they felt that the people who were really into the fraternities were sort of people who needed to belong to almost like followers. Now, I'm not saying that was accurate, but that's how we thought back then. And one of the things I remember in terms of the hazing was one of my friends had really gotten bruised up because he had to go through a line where he was beat with those paddles as part of his pledging and all that, which I thought was kind of barbaric at the time and what have you. So I never joined. I just thought, well, that's for some people, it's not for me, What I have to say about the fraternities, or rather sororities, is one of my earliest girlfriends was a Delta, and then later on I had a girlfriend that was an AKA. But I went up to Penn State in 1970, I think it was 1973, to visit, well, I shouldn't say my girlfriend. There was a girl I had a crush on. She was an AKA. I went up to Penn State to visit some of the friends of mine that went there, but also to try to see her. And I went to this cafeteria at Penn State, And I couldn't remember which dorm the female friend lived in, and so I asked some women that were sitting at the table. And a couple of them didn't know her. And then one says, wait a minute, she's one of those AKAs, isn't she? And the girl says, you're at the Delta table. Don't even sit with us, you know. That kind of a thing, you know. So when I ran into my friend, I told her about that, and she was saying, oh, yeah, we don't deal with those Deltas. So there seemed to be this animosity back then between, I don't know if it was a friendly animosity, but it was almost like somebody spoke of an elitist attitude earlier. And I do think that really existed. Now, there's some great things fraternities and sororities have done, but I do think that the other side of it was that it was they were kind of elitist organizations to me. But that's just my opinion. I'm one person. So I'd just like to hear your comment.
Okay, thank you for calling in, Dimitri. Ladies, you want to respond? Or
so what I can say in my experience, both as a news aide as well as, you know, president at Panhandle, I don't see that. We work together. Now, there might be a little chiding and, you know, some jokes and the like, but at the end of the day, as grown women, we recognize that we all bring something very unique to the table. We all are working very hard to represent our organizations and our brand in the best possible light. And it does not help our brand, it does not help our organization, and it does not help us as individual women for us to try and tear down another woman because she saw something different.
Gotcha. Evelyn, did you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Jennifer. I mean, you're right. You know, I think in college, as undergrad, you know, we always had friendly little competitions. It was only us and the Deltas, and we always had step shows and friendly little competitions. And, you know, of course, each of us thinks our organization is best. But, you know, at the end of the day, we came together, and we helped, and we worked, and we did. And now in Philadelphia, I mean, we've got, you know, three grad chapters in the city of Philadelphia and 5 in surrounding counties, and we all come together for Founders Day. Mm-hmm. We have one big Founders Day. We come together for service projects and to give away scholarships. So, you know, and it's unfortunate that you say that it's elitist. I mean, I know 111 years ago we had the brown paper bag test, and you know, not a lot of black women were going to college and so forth. But you know, these organizations today, I mean, and it's not just the sororities and fraternities. It's the Links, it's Jack and Jill, it's all these wonderful organizations that were founded by people of color with like-minded people, because we all, you know, wanted to help and give back and do something for African American people, and we work together for the betterment of our people. And you know, I think there's a lot of misnomers. There's a lot of rumors out there. But just like Jennifer's nephew said, you let him beat you up. I mean, can you imagine Jennifer's 35-year-old, very well-accomplished attorney? You think, you know, she's going to let somebody beat her up? So I think a lot of this is rumors, and there's misnomers out there. And this is, I'm so thankful, you, Sarita, for letting us talk about this tonight, because that's not what our organizations are about, getting beat up or staying up all night. One of the questions you asked earlier before the break was, did you ever think it was too much? I mean, I had a 6-week program that was every day nonstop, and I never thought it was I thought it was a lot, but never too much where I would turn away and walk away. But it made me stronger. It made me better. It made me be able to, as I said, get along with women and people I didn't know. It gave me appreciation for giving back and helping others. And could I have done that in another organization? Sure, I probably could have. But this organization taught me that to whom much is given, much is required. Mm-hmm. So I was blessed to go to college and be a part of an organization that took time to give back and help somebody else who needed a helping hand. So, yes, it gets hard with anything we do. But when you talk about, it's not about self, it's about helping somebody else. I mean, that's a great feeling. And do you have to do it through a sorority? No, you don't have to. But the lifelong relationships and bonds that you have because of that organization is priceless.
Gotcha.
And it's something that can't be duplicated. So,
I'll tell you what, we're nearing the end of the 8 p.m. hour, but we have a caller on the line, and I don't know, I think we still have some some space to cover a couple of topics. So, I mean, I want to be respectful of your time. So, ladies, let me know, are you comfortable if we move forward a little into the 9 p.m. hour? Is that okay? Does your schedule allow for that?
I'm good.
That's fine with me.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll tell you what. We're going to go ahead and take this break. On the line, I have Evelyn Sample Oates. She's a member of the Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. And in studio, I have Jennifer A. Santiago, Esquire. She is a member of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated. We're talking about Greek life, the ins and outs of it, the misconceptions and criticisms of it, hazing amongst other things. And so we're going to go ahead and take this break. When we come back on the other side, we're going to jump back into some calls and then delve a little deeper into not only the hazing process, but also just the treatment and perspective of the D9, the Divine Nine, versus the majority white Greek organizations that exist. So I'm your host, Sincerely Sarita. You're tuned in to The Lounge on Word Radio, 96.1 FM, 900 AM, and we'll be back after these messages.
News you can use.
Exclusively on Wake Up with Word.
Hosted by the rapping professor, Dr. Aaron Smith. Weekdays, 7 a.m. till 10 a.m.
On Word Radio, wordradio.com, and on the Word Radio app.
At Dietz & Watson, we've spent over 75 years focusing on the details. This can be traced back to our founder, Gottlieb Dietz, who learned how to make franks and sausages the right way in Germany. Today, each one of our delicious offerings is meticulously crafted using perfected details. Because if it isn't good enough for our family, it isn't good enough for yours. To us, the details make all the difference.
The Pennsylvania Horticultural Society supports Word Radio and presents the 2019 Philadelphia Flower Show, Flower Power, March 2nd to 10th at the Pennsylvania Convention Center. 10 acres of blooming gardens and artful floral displays will celebrate the enormous impact of flowers in our lives as floral designers from 23 countries compete for the FTD World Cup. Hands-on experiences and special events for all ages held daily. Tickets and details available at theflowershow.com.
We are
progressive and proud and interactive.
Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at onWURD. This is Word Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD Philadelphia.
Streaming live at wordradio.com.
Hey now, this is Dr. Guthrie Ramsey of Musicology, and you're listening to The Lounge on Word Radio.
You're in the lounge on WURD Radio, 96.1 FM, 900 AM. I am your host. In my head, I keep saying guest host, and I gotta work on it. I'm not a guest host anymore. I'm the official host. And shout out to Envy McKee. She's the official host for Friday nights in the lounge. So, you know, I'm holding you down Monday through Thursday, 7 to 10 p.m. And then Envy is holding it down Friday, 7 to 10 p.m. So that was the big news that came out last week. And shout out to Keaton Nichols for coming through and, like, I know he said he doesn't consider it passing the baton. But for lack of better words, and I just really don't know how else to explain it, that's essentially what he did. Was just like, all right, y'all, they got it. They running with it. So I appreciate that, and shout out to him and all the great things that he is doing. In our studio tonight and on the show, we're talking about Greek life, right? The ins and outs of it, misconceptions and criticisms, and so much more. And so I'm thankful to welcome Jennifer A. Santiago, Esquire, who is a member of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority, Inc., to this conversation. She's also the president of the National Pan-Hellenic Council for Southeastern Pennsylvania. And we also have Evelyn Sample Oates, who's on the phone, and she is a member of the Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. She's also the executive director at the School District of Philadelphia and a former international board member for Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. Let's go to our phone lines. On line 3, we have Paris out of Elkins Park, who is our first-time caller. So shout out to you. Thank you for calling in. But it looks like you have some comments about hazing. Is that correct?
Yes. Hi. Good evening, everybody. Miss Sample Oaks, first and foremost. If nobody knows who your father is, I used to listen to him on the radio on the weekend. He was a great man.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. My mom used to make listen to him, and he was a great person. President Santiago, you're doing an outstanding job. And the full disclosure, I do want to say that on the 22nd of this month, I will have 22 years in Kappa Alpha Psi.
Congratulations. And for all of the listeners, Paris is actually a past president of the National Pan-Hellenic Council for Southeastern Pennsylvania. In fact, fun fact, he was president when it was Philly NPHC before it transferred over to the NPHC of SEPA.
All right.
Thank you.
You got that shout out. So, but no, you know what? I am glad, Paris, that you decided to call in. I do want to hear your thoughts, and specifically, you know, because I've said a few times throughout the program this evening that we're discussing Greek life really in light of the recent death of Marlon W. Jackson, who, for those who may not be familiar, he was a 23-year-old student at Delaware State University who passed away in a fatal car crash last week. And his family, they're alleging that he fell asleep at the wheel as a result of being hazed while going through the intake process of becoming a Kappa Alpha Psi. And so given that you have 22 years, and being a Kappa Alpha Psi, I'm definitely, you know, interested in hearing your perspective on this situation and just your experience in general.
Sure. First and foremost, my heart goes out to that family. Nobody sends their child to college to be brought home in box, unfortunately. So my heart goes out to that family and all the families who were in that horrific accident. Now, since I know that's being investigated, I don't want to speak specifically on that because, you know, stuff is still being investigated. Stuff will come out. But just in general, I know I heard some comments earlier about hazing in the process, this, that, and the other. As was said earlier, you know, and I've been to a lot of risk assessment events over time and serving in various positions. You know, number one, like Jennifer said, hazing was outlawed back in 1990 by all the organizations. Now, does stuff go on underground by older members who believe something should go forward to have tradition and history? I'm not going to say no, but we have to remember slavery one time was a tradition as well. You know what I mean? And it will become the downfall of our organizations. I do want to, the reason why I called, one of the main reasons why I called, what really bothered me is the word elitism. And that really bothered me because, you know, I look at the fact that, let's say tomorrow, all of our organizations dissolve. what would we lose? We would lose all these scholarships.
Mm-hmm.
We would lose all these community service hours. You know, we lose the opportunity to go out to feed the homeless and what have you. So I think that members of our organization are definitely humble. Now, if you remember the 80s, 90s TV show Rock, that was my life. My father worked for the city as a trash man for 30 years. My mother was a nurse for 45 years. So I didn't have no idea of what Greek life was until I went up to Penn State, and the brothers, at the time, the reason why I joined, they were leading the campus. And I said, I want to be with a group of guys like this. You know what I mean? So, yes, is there bad characters in our organization? Yes, and I'm glad we're having this conversation because just like race in America, and just like policing issues, you cannot address the problems. You have that conversation. So you're doing an outstanding job doing that. But, you know, and I hate to say it like this, but just because we have some negative characters, you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Because nobody's going to give away all these scholarships. Nobody's doing that community service work. Nobody's doing anything except most of the members of the Greek organization. And last point, and I'll hang up, you know, if you take a look at throughout the history, a lot of our great African-American leaders were members of these various organizations. Martin Luther King, Thurgood Marshall, you know what I mean? So I would say that, and thank you. Again, it's a great conversation. I guess I'm a little bit nervous.
No, we definitely appreciate you calling in, and I'm glad you all are speaking to the risk assessment part of it. Okay, so my mind's going a couple different ways at this point. He mentioned that, you know, some of our greatest leaders in the community, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and others, were a part of Greek organizations. And part of me wonders if that, although should and could be praised, if when folks say elitist, that also feeds into that narrative, right? Like I can see how some folks would be like, well, exactly, elitist. Like, look at the ranks that they raised up through and the connections that got them there, and yada yada yada. So I can see, like, devil's advocate, that whole conversation being had, right? So that's one thing.
So,
go ahead.
Would you call them elitists, or would you call Martin Luther King W.E.?
I wouldn't.
Oh.
No. That's why I said playing devil's advocate. For folks who who really genuinely feel that way, that may be actually proving their point. Like, could a Martin Luther King rise up every day? Like, or is that a result solely, not solely, but, you know, did that play a part, him being a part of a Greek organization, and not just him, but others? Did that play a part in what he was able to do and what they were able to accomplish? So I'm just saying devil's advocate. I don't view them as elitists.
Because I would definitely say that my frat brother, Congressman John Lewis, would absolutely hate being called elitist. And he absolutely would, you know, outright deny to anyone that it was, you know, solely because of.
Right.
But we cannot deny that these amazing leaders in our history were members of the D9.
And that's, like, it sounds, at least from what I know about it, like that's part of the appeal, right? That's part of the benefits, is that there is this network and there is this support and there are these thousands upon thousands upon thousands of folks that you can call or you have access to. That's a part of what it sounds like you sign up for it.
It's any,
not solely, but
it's like any other network, whether it be my being part of the Bar Association, or, I mean, I went to Central High School here in Philadelphia, and anybody knows anything about Central. Exactly. I'm 259 all day, every day, and I know that I can go through that book and find someone.
Yeah.
But what does that mean?
That's a great point, Jennifer, to bring up, is that the network. I mean, you know, there's people that move to Philly no idea about Philly, don't know anybody, and don't say, so Evelyn, somebody gave me your number instead of calling them, but to pick up the phone and know that no matter where you go, there's going to be a member of Zeta Phi Beta or a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha, and you're never alone because you're going to find one somewhere.
And I just don't see how anyone looks at that and says that's a bad thing.
Right.
I mean, we have sorors that do move from place to place. I mean, we have sorors in Abu Dhabi. Do you know how awesome it is for me to be able to go into a group and say, hey, sorors, I'm going to be visiting. Anyone around? And have hundreds upon hundreds of women say, sure, I'll show you around. Just this past summer, I had a soror who was coming in from Dallas. And she reached out and she's like, any sorors in Philly willing to show me around? Absolutely. For no other reason than you are my sister.
Gotcha. So what, if at all, and thinking about one of the points that was raised and just even a part of it, my own, kind of contemplation with whether or not I would go down that route and entering the intake process. I'm self-correcting, y'all. The topic about the money associated with it, right? Especially for those who are in undergrad. Is there any plan or thoughts or ideas being discussed currently about how to possibly lessen that burden or that requirement? What is it? What does it cost right now? Because like I said, if I recall correctly, during the time that I was at Temple, and this would have been 2008, I think when I first entered, I think I was quoted at like $1,000. And that was not realistic. I could not do that. I was on welfare. I was a young mom, college, going to school full time, all of that. Can you all kind of give some insight into like where is it now and what's the intake process like really consists of?
What I can tell you is that I am not authorized to give that information.
Okay.
I can tell you that there is a financial cost associated, and all women who approach Zeta, and actually I feel like I can say about any of the organizations, none of us try to say that there's not a financial component.
Right.
None of the organizations. So when a woman or a man approaches a member of the organization, interested, wanting to go through the process, that is part of the transparency. We let you know that this there is a financial component.
Gotcha.
The financial component, from what I can gather, is different for each organization.
Yes.
But
gotcha.
There's no, there's not a, we're hiding this. You will know that there's a financial component, and you will know that well in advance.
Right.
So,
which was just true in my case. That was absolutely true. Eva, I don't know if you were chiming in, Evelyn. I wanted to make sure I don't move forward without checking in.
Yeah, and I agree with Jennifer. I mean, I can't disclose that information because it really does vary as whether undergraduate or graduate, and what different program. I mean, so it varies with us as well. And again, there's a financial obligation. I think if you come in on the grad level, you understand that, and you have to decide if that's something you want to invest in. But I think on the undergrad level, that we should not let that be a deterrent for smart, brilliant, outstanding young women who we want in our organization. We should not turn them down because it's a money factor and they can't afford it. Because some of them, 4.0 brilliant young ladies, are there on scholarship, and
right.
I can't imagine calling my mom up who's got me there on the scholarship and saying, can you give me X amount of dollars? I want to be in a sorority, and maybe my mother has never been to college, and she's like, what?
What? Yeah.
I can. They're taking money down there to eat. You're talking about a sorority, but we've got to look at, and I'm saying we as Alpha, and we do look at ways that the financial piece does not deter young people, young undergraduates from coming in.
Now, what I will say, though, is it is a financial component no different than when I was in law school and I joined the various organizations, the Bar Association. I was a member of the Hispanic National Bar Association, as well as the local Hispanic Bar. All of those had costs associated.
You got your dues. Yeah.
And that's really what it is. It's your dues. And you have to make the decision. For some people, it's not feasible at a young age. I would love to see people coming in through undergrad, even as somebody who came in through grad. However, our organizations, God willing, will continue to grow and continue to thrive, and they will still be here if you want to come in through the graduate level. And so that's the other thing for a lot of people. When, you know, they found out I went over and I became a Zeta, everyone was like, wait, Jen, you're 35 years old. Didn't that end? And I had to explain to them that we do have graduate chapters. And so what I tell anybody who feels like the money is a factor, it may be a factor right now, because guess what? At 19, that may seem like a lot of money. When you get older, we're still here. And if your heart is still here, we're still willing to accept you with arms open wide.
Well, and I'm glad, like, we kind of are discussing the difference in time and place in life, right, and where you're at and what's feasible, and then, you know, that intake process in undergrad versus graduate. And that, you know, brings me to Brittany Mingo. She's a college advisor and a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, who wanted to be a part of this discussion, but unfortunately is feeling under the weather. But she did send me over kind of some of her thoughts and contributions that she wanted to give to this conversation. And she touched on this concept of a skater. And so she was just sharing that when speaking with her high school students and, you know, talking about this process or their interest in potentially becoming a member of a Greek organization, just kind of what she lays out for them in terms of what they need to take into consideration. And so something that she wrote was, once I go through the lesson about let me quote. She said, once I go through the lesson about pledging and what it means to be a skater, I always ask, who do you think is a skater? The one who pledges but doesn't do any work afterwards, or the one who doesn't pledge but works hard on campus creating programming and participating in service? Almost every time, 100% of my students answer is the former. Pledging doesn't make us great. The work we dedicate ourselves to afterwards is what matters most. And so I offer that. And trying to really, first of all, lay out for our listeners, what does it mean to be a skater? Because from my understanding, when I was in undergrad and I expressed that, you know, if I were to go to grad school, that might be something that I consider, because I figured, okay, maybe by then I'll have, like, you know, I'll be able to be in a better financial state and go down that journey. And was kind of deterred from it. It was like, if you do that, you're going to be viewed as a skater. Like, you didn't really actually go through the intake process, that you paid for your membership, but you didn't da-da-da-da. And so that was a deterrent for me. And so hearing that's where you came in at, like, was that a concern for you? You know what I mean? Like, is this concept actually true? All of those things. Let's take a break, and when we come back on the other side, if you ladies are cool, let's dive into that. So listen, you are tuned in to The Lounge on WURD Radio, 96.1 FM, 900 AM. We're going to go ahead and take this break. We'll be back on the other side.
Listen to Word Radio on the go with the Word Radio app. Search for WURD in your favorite app store today and take us with you wherever you go. Stay connected to Word Radio, independent Black media.
This is Ronald Clark from Moravia Health. Moravia Health Home Care Service are an excellent option for individuals who need medical attention or even non-medical assistance with daily activities, but would rather receive this care in the comfort of their own homes. Make this change today. Come and experience Moravia Health for yourself. Call Moravia Health at 215-717-8650 or visit moraviahealth.com. Moravia Health, because there's no place like home.
This is Word Radio, independent Black media.
Millions plan for retirement online. Estimate your future benefits, apply for retirement, and manage your benefits all from the comfort of your home. And give yourself the freedom to do what you want offline. Social Security's online services help put you in control with secure access to your information anytime, anywhere, allowing you to spend more time with family, friends, or simply just enjoying the day. Social Security, securing today and tomorrow. See what you can do online at socialsecurity.gov.
Produced at U.S. taxpayer expense.
Hey, this is Bianca Ingram, and you are listening to The Lounge on Word Radio.
You're in the lounge on Word Radio 96.1 FM 900 AM. I'm your host, sincerely, Sarita, and we've been having a really, I honestly would say, an insightful discussion. I'm learning a lot. Appreciate all of our callers who have been joining our discussion on Greek life and kind of going through this journey with us about the ins and outs of the Greek life and misconceptions and criticisms. Also hazing, all of these different things that we're exploring. Appreciate you all for being here with us. If you would love to call in or join this conversation, we invite you to. You can call into our hotline at 215-634-8065. Again, that's 215-634-8065. And then toll free 866-361-0900. Again, that's 866-361-0900. We are broadcasting live on Facebook, so you can tune in that way as well. If you go to Word Radio Facebook page, you can watch us in studio here. I'm joined with Jennifer A. Santiago Esquire, and then we also have Evelyn, I was about to say Coates, and that's not it. But Evelyn Sample Oates, who is a member of the Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. So we're having this discussion, and you're welcome to join us. And shout out to the folks who are listening via the stream that we have going on wordradio.com and also through the free Word app, which you can find in the Apple App Store as well as Google Play. So that's that. Ladies, let's jump back in. Before we went to break, just touched on this concept of being a skater if you don't go through the intake process during undergrad. And first of all, like, because you are both members, can you speak to, is that a thing, or what, is there a difference in when you pledge and how you're viewed? But then also, I guess, any misconceptions or criticisms that you both might want to make sure you address when it comes to this concept of being a skater.
Well, I think, as I said, I was initiated as an undergraduate 35 years ago. But this process has evolved over the 111 years that Alpha Kappa Alpha has been in existence. So it's been long as you pledge for a whole year. My father pledged for a whole year charting a chapter, or some people pledged for a semester. Some people did it 6 weeks, 2 weeks, a weekend. So it's gone through a lot of different renditions. But what matters the most is just what this Delta said earlier, is that the work you do once you're in the organization. It doesn't matter how you came in. What are you doing now to perpetuate the legacy, the brand, and the work of the organization? Are you paying dues? If people don't pay, you could become an AKA 40 years ago, but if you're not paying dues to sustain the organization, then how's it helping? If you're not doing work to help other people, what good is it for the organization? So I speak at undergraduate MIPs and graduate MIP initiation lunches all the time. And I say the real work begins tomorrow. What you do tomorrow, that's the real work. So, and when they talk about skating because of what you did to get in, our founders, they didn't do all that stuff you talk about. So are they skaters? The line that came in after the founders, they didn't do all that. So are they skaters? So that term is ridiculous. It's silly, and it should never be used. But stand on the work you do once you get in the organization.
Yeah, I definitely agree. The first thing that struck me when you read the quote, and it's no disrespect to Miss Mingo, but the language itself, I do not necessarily believe or agree that it should be used with high schoolers, because that's not language that we use anymore at all. Okay? There may be some subsects that have that mentality, but just as Evelyn said, and much to what Miss Mingo went ahead and was trying to bring out, is once you become a member, once you have your 3 letters on, once you have your colors on, what are you doing to enhance the brand? What are you doing to enhance the organization? What are you doing in general? Are you just sitting there and saying, well, I've gotten my letters, I'm good? Or are you out there in the community? Are you helping? Are you performing that service? Are you giving back? are you, helping the next man or woman up? If you're not doing any of that, then does it even matter how hard you came in, how easy you came in, whether it was 1 day, 1 weekend, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, a semester, a year? I mean, none of that matters, because you're just sitting there, and you're just the same way we would say about anybody else in the community outside of the Greek life. If you're not doing anything to help your fellow man or woman, like, you've literally given up all your talents. And the reality is, if we're all honest, all of us have been given gifts and talents, and it's not for us to sit on. And so one of the best things about Greek life and about our organizations is you now have an outlet to go ahead and give those gifts and talents to the community.
Gotcha. Okay. And so I want to kind of switch gears a bit, because we've touched on it a few times, the risk assessment, right? What does that process consist of? I don't know that we really dived into that, but especially from your perspective, Jennifer, when you're looking at, I don't know if it's like looking at chapters or what that might be, can you kind of walk us through the risk assessment process for those who, for example, are looking at these different instances in the media where there's alleged hazing or confirmed hazing that has gone on, and they're wondering, okay, now what are the Greek organizations going to do about that? How are members being held accountable when they do cross that line, even though it's clearly stated that hazing is forbidden, that clearly outlined what the intake process should be. Let's give them some kind of context so that they know when they see these instances in the media, they can have some idea of like, okay, so this is probably the trajectory of this.
So first and foremost, the most important thing to understand when it comes to risk assessment, when instances of hazing are in fact confirmed, they don't just look at the undergraduate chapter, because each undergraduate chapter has a graduate chapter that oversees. And so the reality is each organization has its own rules and regulations set into place. But legally, because that funnel Esquire behind my name, you are actually not just at risk of losing your membership into the organization. You're not just at risk of personal lawsuits, because do not be fooled, while we, as the D9, are insured, when you step out of your realm and you step out of what is in fact authorized, you can actually run the risk of the insurance company giving a reservation of rights letter saying, we will not insure you against a lawsuit. So now you've allowed yourself to become personally liable. For those of us who have professional licenses, whether it's in the medicine, in education, in law, you also then run the risk of losing that as well, because hazing is illegal in, I think, almost every state, but maybe 4 or 5. So now there are also criminal liabilities. And so people need to understand that this is not something that on a grand scale the D9 looks at and says, it's no big deal. No. The D9, organization to organization, have an actual system set up in place where either, chapters can be suspended, members can be suspended. There is a probation process, depending upon how severe the instance is. But even outside of that, there are also legal ramifications. There are professional ramifications that all go into play. Because at the end of the day, much like Paris said, no one sends their child to these universities, to these colleges, to not have them come home in this same condition or better. The hope is always that these children come home better because they're smarter, they're wiser, they're grown. But at least let my child come home same as I send him out or I send her out.
Gotcha. Evelyn, did you want to chime in at all?
Yeah, and we have a national risk management team. I mean, we take hazing allegations very seriously. We investigate them both on undergraduate and graduate level, and we will put a cease and desist immediately and look into it. We take it very seriously because it hurts the entire organization. It hurts all Divide 9 organizations. So we have to look into it. We have to take it seriously. And we've got to put a stop to it. And we collectively have got to continue to work at this and stop this, because no child, no human being should be hurt by our organizations. Our organizations were meant for good and not for harm. So, risk management hurts our brand. It hurts us, getting corporate dollars. It hurts us getting keeping our members engaged and financial. So it hurts all the way around. And we all have got to make an effort, a commitment to just stop the hazing and, just nip it in the bud. And because it does nothing but hurt. I mean, what happened, allegedly to this young man, like I said, is devastating. It's horrible. And I just pray that just for the family, but just that our organization, should not be responsible for hurting anybody when we were meant to help.
So at this point, knowing that it's 2019, right, and apparently to some degree, it can be fair to say that hazing is still happening out here, right? Not that it's widespread or that it's contained to any one particular organization, but that this sounds like it's something that the D9 in general is aware of, and it sounds like are putting certain protocols into place, have put certain protocols into place to ensure that this isn't something that is encouraged or rewarded or whatever else the case may be. Just interested to get both of your thoughts. Like, what needs to be done right now? What message needs to be sent? Because it sounds like there are still members out there, for whatever reason, that may be still engaging in this.
So I'm going to actually flip the hypothesis and just throw something out there.
Okay.
We can all acknowledge and say that there is definite instances of police brutality, right?
Yes.
We would never say disband the police, would we?
Oh, no, that's not what I'm saying.
No, and I get it. But for a lot of people, the answer to these allegations of hazing, which, by the way, are far fewer than the instances of police brutality that have been coming up recently, okay?
Yeah.
No one would ever turn around and say disband the police because they don't know how to not shoot our black and brown brothers. No one would ever say that. But for whatever reason, people are comfortable saying disband the D9, irrespective of the fact that we provide many good works and that we are very supportive of the community, that we are out here helping. Just 3 weeks ago, Iota Phi Theta was outside when it was cold as all get out, giving out blessing bags to the homeless that were right there by the art museum. There was no news coverage. There was nothing. I know about it because of the position I sit in. But that is who we are. We're not always about it for the news. Now, understand, I am not anti-police by any stretch of imagination. I'm actually a cop's kid. But I give that example because everybody now can say, damn, there's a lot going on with that. But no one would ever say, let's get rid of them, because we need them. At the end of the day, whether we want to acknowledge it or not, the D9 serves a very important part in our community, whether it's raising up leaders, whether it's giving somebody, giving a young child somebody positive to look up to. We are out here helping. And just because we have a few people who, for whatever reason, can't get it through their heads that this is not how we operate, we will continue to identify them. We will continue to send out those ceases and desist. We will continue to suspend. We will continue to make sure it's known that you do not speak and stand for us.
Right.
All right.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead,
I agree. We have to keep working on it. We have to. Because, again, it's not a perfect world, not a perfect group, and people, they make bad decisions and choices sometimes. So I think we just have to keep working at it. But it's so much more, good than bad. So much more. So we just got to keep working at it.
Got you. And we still have a little time before we go to break. And so, Jennifer, there was something that you spoke on as far as the legality of hazing, right? And how, and it sounds like with the exception of 4 to 5 states, it's illegal. You can't do it. I'm curious about the states where it's not illegal. Like, why would that?
Hawaii, Alaska, Montana, South Dakota.
But like, why would it not be legal? Like, be illegal in those states?
Honestly, every state can do what they want in terms of what they choose to outlaw. So I honestly could not speak to what another legislature has done or hasn't done. I can tell you here in Pennsylvania, absolutely it's illegal.
And what goes into that at least based on what you know in Pennsylvania, what went into that legislation, right? Was that the D9 like pushing and saying, hey, we want to make sure this is, made to be illegal, or is that?
It's a combination of things. Okay. As with any legislature, any piece of legislation that goes forward, it can be reaction to what's going on. Mm-hmm. It can be, people pushing for it. It can be, the folks in the House of Representatives looking, or even the folks in the Senate looking at it, the state Senate looking and saying this is an issue, and a bill gets passed. So I can't tell you specifically what caused our legislature here in Pennsylvania to say this is going to be illegal, but mark my words, you can find it on the books. It is illegal.
Gotcha. Okay, and so let me see. I got a break. I had to look at Frosty because I was about to get into my last what I'm feeling like would be my last point, and that, or second to last point, would be the treatment and perspective of the Divine Nine versus majority white organizations. And randomly, doing some research, I saw that like Harvard has this policy against single-sex groups, and they actually caught some backlash about that. And so basically what they said was that if you were an organization on campus, and this applied to sororities and fraternities as well, that you had to go co-ed. And definitely interested, I mean, the sororities on campus were basically like, what do you mean? No. Like, especially after the fact that this whole thing came out as a result of some activity that was happening on campus, and their position was that those instances have mainly been happening with fraternities, so why would you apply this to sororities? But I'm interested to get your thoughts on, single-sex organizations, especially since you're both a part of sororities, and it is Women's History Month. So I'm just interested to, make sure we amplify the voices and all of that stuff of our women and women's empowerment. And then also, I came across the policy, or at some point, policy against wearing Greek letters or paraphernalia while protesting. And I know you spoke to kind of police
brutality.
Just so you know,
that's not every organization.
That's not everyone, right. No. So I wanted to kind of flesh that out because I know some folks had also mentioned that to me. So they were interested in knowing, like, where are we at with that at this point, or where are you all at with this point? Because I'm not, like I said, y'all, I haven't pledged. But listen, we're going to go ahead and take a break. I am joined by Jennifer A. Santiago, as well as Evelyn Sample Oates, and we're having this discussion about Greek life. If you have any questions, thoughts, or experiences that you want to contribute to the conversation, feel free to call in 215-634-8065, toll free 866-361-0900, or check us out on Word Radio Facebook Live and drop your comments there. Drop your thoughts, comments in that section that's available. We're going to go ahead, take this break. The Lounge, Word Radio, 96.1 FM, 900 AM. We'll be back.
Brothers and sisters!
Don't miss The Source.
Weekdays 10 a.m. to 1 p.m.
on Word Radio.
WordRadio.com and the Word Radio app.
Arden Theater Company presents August Wilson's Gem of the Ocean. Set in 1904, this first installment of Wilson's American Century Cycle journeys to Pittsburgh's Hill District to tell a mystical story of freedom, justice, and redemption. Playing February 28th through March 31st. For tickets to August Wilson's Gem of the Ocean, go to ardentheater.org or call 215-922-1122.
Be heard. Be heard. Want another way to join the conversation?
Follow us on social media
using the hashtag onWURD.
Be heard.
Stay connected to Word Radio.
Independent Black Media.
Annenberg Center Live presents the world premiere of Vessels. In this theatrical performance, 7 women explore the transcendental possibilities of song as a survival tool during the slave trade's Middle Passage. Set in an interactive sculptural environment that invokes the infamous slave ships, this performance considers the question, what does freedom sound like in a space of confinement? Each performance will be followed by an opportunity for audience members to process the experience in an interactive setting with performers. Vessels Vessels is co-commissioned by Annenberg Center Live in partnership with Junebug Productions and National Performance Network Visual Artists Network. At the Annenberg, March 7th through March 10th. Tickets are available now at annenbergcenter.org or 215-898-3900.
What's going on? This is Asher Roth, and you're listening to The Lounge on Word Radio.
You're in the lounge on Word Radio, 96.1 FM, 900 AM. We've been having a really insightful discussion tonight, focusing on Greek life, the ins and outs of it, the criticisms and misconceptions of it, definitely talking about hazing. We've had quite a bit going on in the news that has really led up into this conversation, but I feel like this isn't the first time this conversation is being had, but I do feel like it's a timely moment to have it, and I'm very thankful to have my guest join me to discuss this. And so shout out to Evelyn Sample Oates as well as Jennifer A. Santiago Esquire. So ladies, prior to the break, one of the things I touched on that I would love for us to explore and just to get your perspective on or your thoughts on is the treatment or the perspective of like D9 versus Divine Nine versus non-Divine Nine Greek organizations. Do you all feel like Divine Nine organizations are treated differently than non-Divine Nine organizations, whether it's in how you're viewed or discussed in the media, whether it's how the community at large supports you or does not? I mean, let me just stop. Let me just pause there. Let me not ramble. Go ahead and I'll let y'all go.
So absolutely, I do think that there is a difference in treatment. One of the things that I have said openly since being installed as the current NPHC president is that I wanted to change how people viewed the D9. And the reason for that is, we can all acknowledge that what happened at Del State is horrible. And if in fact it is as a result of hazing, it will be addressed and needs to be addressed. However, it's as if every instance of hazing that people discuss immediately gets attributed to the D9. And that's not true. Even most recently, the instance that happened up in Penn State, everyone still looked at us. And it was not a D9 organization that the young man unfortunately suffered alcohol poisoning at. It was not us. Mm-hmm. But they still looked at it as if it was us. I'm honestly not sure how do we address that other than continuing to highlight all of the good that we do. Because one of the major differences between the D9 and most of the non-D9, and I have to say most of because there are some that continue to do work after they graduate is the fact that, one, we do intake after you graduate, so you can come in through grad chapter, and our work continues well after. I mean, you heard Evelyn say it. She's 35 years in. If this was going to end, she would have just been 3.5 and been done. You know, we have members in our organization that, I mean, have been in for 60, 70 years, and they continue to do work. And so it's important that we continue to highlight, first and foremost, the difference is that this is a lifetime. We continue to give back. We continue to uplift. We continue to promote good in the community. And so it's something that literally burns me up when I think about the fact that they attribute every negative Greek event to the D9, because it's not us.
Yeah, and I also think that, you know, when you talk about sororities and fraternities, a lot of the majority folks, they don't understand the seriousness of what we do. And I think that when you hear sororities and fraternities, a lot of people who don't really know say, oh, that's in college. I mean, you're out of college, right? They don't understand the millions of dollars for scholarships. They don't understand the millions of hours in service. And I just think that, you know, when everything happened in Penn State, a year and a half or so ago, I wrote an article for the Inquirer last April that talked about it does more good than harm. And, you know, even in undergrad, I mean, our organizations don't sit out there and you know, have these drinking games, and it's just, you know, when I was in school, at a majority school, it was the majority fraternities and sororities that had rush week, and they were drinking, and it was this and it was that, and it wasn't about serious service, and it wasn't about educating about the history, the deep history and the sacrifice, and why we even came into existence. Why did these, you know, for me, why did these 16 women come together at Howard University 111 years ago? Why? What did they have to go through to start this organization that is something like it never existed before? You know, so that kind of serious history and sacrifice and struggle, that's not their story. That's our story. So when we go to, you know, when we have these events as graduate members, or we go to corporations to raise money and sponsorship, sometimes they don't quite understand, oh, this is just a fraternity or sorority. And we have to educate them on who we are and what we do. And I think we do. We are kind of put in a box of a fraternity or sorority. And that's what we are, but we're so much more than that. We're a brotherhood, and we're a business organization, and we're a sisterhood, and we help improve the quality of people's lives. And that's much more than I can say. You know, I'm sorry about some of the majority organizations.
We're not social clubs. That's the biggest thing.
Social, no.
And I even like in that instance that I mentioned with Harvard, right? And then I don't want to say it was a mandate, but them basically trying to push for this quote-unquote inclusion with single-sex organizations. They focused on social clubs, but also included sororities and fraternities in it, and saying that, you know, they wanted to make sure that everyone had a safe space, and so therefore all of the organizations and whatnot on campus needed to become co-ed. And so I was asking you too whether or not you felt like just kind of broadening that conversation, should sororities and fraternities be co-ed?
No.
Yeah, no, that's crazy.
No.
Yeah, no.
First of all, listening to their logic that there needs to be a safe space, that is actually the reason that we do keep it single sex.
Well, let me correct myself. The sororities who pushed back said that there was this need for safe spaces for women.
But I would argue
Harvard's push for it was a result of, it seems like, some instances on campus where they saw just behavior that wasn't, you know, aligned with what they want to be, and so they came up with this mandate. And so
I would argue that
that's where that
you know, many people would agree that, you know, women need safe spaces, but I think that does a disservice to our brothers. Men also need safe spaces. And when you're talking about a young man, 18 to 22, trying to figure out what's going to be his next move in life, he may not feel comfortable talking to his girl because in his mind, I've got to be a man. So who does he turn to? He can turn to his brothers. And if you start to make these fraternities and sororities co-ed, you lose that. Now understand, I say that as a woman who said, absolutely not, I'm not going to girls' high because I did not want to be in an all-girls school. But as I've gotten older, I've recognized that need to have my sisters by me. And the same way I need my sisters, I recognize that men need their brothers, because there are just certain things in life that you as a woman, you can support him, but you can't help him. You know, you can pray for him, but you can't raise him up. He needs another man that he can look up to and have that man pull him up and teach him, the same way a man can't look at us and tell us how to live our lives because he can't raise us. We each face our own issues and problems, and you need that safe space. So I need to turn to my sister. He needs to be able to turn to his brother.
Gotcha. Well, ladies, listen, we do have to wrap this up. It's about that time for us to leave the lounge. But I want to thank you both, Jennifer A. Santiago, Esquire, who is a member of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated and the president of the National Pan-Hellenic Council for Southeastern Pennsylvania, and Evelyn Sample Oates, who is a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated and the executive director at the School District of Philadelphia. She also served as the former international board member for Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. My thanks to you both for your time, for your insight, for your transparency. Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, loves. So we have to go ahead and get out of here.